The message bled through the void, a ghost in the machine that arrived not with a whimper, but with the seismic crack of a universe shifting on its axis. For 47 light-years it had traveled, a chain of alien glyphs burning into Earth's servers, a language not of logic, but of chilling, elegant menace. Within 6 hours, the code was broken, a testament to human ingenuity. Within 12, that same ingenuity curdled into universal dread. The words, now translated, hung in the air of every command center like a funeral shroud. Primitive species of the third planet, you have been discovered. Your world possesses resources we require. Submit and be assimilated. Resist and be annihilated. You have one solar rotation to decide. The Calrath Empire had spoken. The clock, ticking down to oblivion, had begun. Like, subscribe, share, and comment below. What would you do if humanity had just one day to decide its fate? In Geneva, beneath the vaulted ceiling of the United Nations Emergency Council, the air was thick with the pheromones of panic. The gathered representatives of a fractured planet were a mosaic of despair, faces etched with the pallor of fear, eyes blazing with impotent fury, hands clenched in disbelief. For 3 cacophonous hours, the chamber echoed with the din of a species confronting its own extinction. Voices rose in a desperate chorus, pleas for immediate capitulation, cries for defiant but doomed resistance, whispers of impossible escapes to stars they could not even reach. It was the sound of a civilization on the verge of shattering. Then, from the shadowed back of the room, a voice cut through the chaos. Later, no one could recall the speaker's face or name, only the words, delivered not as a shout, but as a cold, clear statement of fact that froze the blood. They want a war, the voice said. Let's give them one they'll never forget. A silence, profound and terrible, descended. In that silence, a monstrous idea was born. Not a strategy of honor, but of calculated savagery. Not a mobilization of heroes, but of horrors. The response Earth sent was a masterstroke of psychological judo, simple and devastating. We accept your declaration of war. We request 6 months to prepare our forces. Aboard the Imperial flagship, Pride of Calrath, Commander Vriss read the translation, and his laughter, a deep, rumbling tremor that shook the very deck plates, echoed through the sanctum of his command center. His subordinate officers joined the chorus of disdain. 6 months? Vriss chuckled, the sound rich with 4 millennia of unquestioned superiority. These primitives think time is a currency that can buy them parity. Grant their quaint request. Let them scurry. Send observers. I want to see what farce they believe will be their salvation. Vriss was no mere commander. He was a living monument to imperial might. A veteran of 32 campaigns, he had broken the regenerating Zelthians, shattered the perfectly coordinated Mauric hive mind, and reduced the Sentinel defense line, a fortress that had held for 2 centuries, to cosmic dust. In the Empire's long, unblemished history, victory was not an outcome. It was a natural law. Humanity, with its chemical rockets and moon dust colonies, its hundreds of squabbling nations, was not an enemy. It was a resource to be processed. Yet, Vriss was thorough. He dispatched his 3 most astute intelligence officers to Earth. Their initial reports were not of sprawling military-industrial complexes or gleaming new fleets, but of something profoundly unsettling. "Commander," his chief intelligence officer reported, her visage troubled on the vidscreen. "They are not mobilizing their militaries. They are emptying their prisons. Every penal facility on the planet. They are releasing the inmates. Vriss leaned forward, his brow furrowed. For what purpose? Labor? They are given a choice, she continued, her voice tightening. Full pardon or enlistment in something called the Frontier Force. Over 97% are enlisting. What are their crimes? The officer's gaze dropped to her datapad. Murder, assault, war crimes, torture, terrorism, mass murder. They are releasing their worst predators, Commander. All of them. A cold, unfamiliar knot began to form in Vriss's gut. Desperation, he reasoned. They plan to throw bodies at us. A tactic of pathetic, brute force arithmetic. But the reports grew stranger, darker. Earth's new force was being segmented into tiers. Tier 1. Former soldiers, discharged for brutality. Mercenaries with kill counts in the triple digits. Special Forces operatives deemed too unstable for civilized warfare. Tier 2. Serial killers. War criminals whose atrocities haunted their own species. The truly broken minds kept in high-security psychiatric abyss. And Tier 3. A category spoken of in whispers. A void of classified files that even Earth's leaders seemed to fear. Then the training footage arrived. Vriss watched, mesmerized and repulsed, as human recruits moved through simulated ruins, not with discipline, but with a feral, joyful chaos. They fought each other without rules, laughing through simulated death, learning to weaponize pain, unpredictability, and sheer, unadulterated terror. An instructor, his face a roadmap of scars, pointed at a hologram of a Calrath warrior. They are stronger. Their tech is better. So we do not fight fair, he snarled. Fair fights are for sports. This is war. You make them miss. You make them afraid. If captured, you make them so uncomfortable, they wish they'd killed you. They are not training soldiers, Vriss whispered, the knot in his gut tightening. They are training terrorists. Very effective ones, sir, his officer replied. As the 6-month deadline neared its end, Earth's fleet assembled. It was an abomination against the very concept of a navy, where Calrath vessels were sleek monuments to order. These were jagged nightmares, cobbled from civilian haulers and industrial scows, weapons welded on like afterthoughts. Ballistic missiles, railguns, kinetic launchers, primitive, brutal, and numerous. Thousands of them. And on their hulls, painted in garish, defiant colors, were tallies, kill counts, for a war that had not yet begun. The night before the Imperial fleet's departure, Vriss's officers intercepted Earth's final transmission to its monstrous legion. He read it alone in his quarters, the words searing themselves into his mind. To all Frontier Force personnel, you know what you are. You know what you have done. Society locked you away because you were too dangerous, too violent, too broken. Peace required your cages. But now we need you for what you are. We need your violence. We need your chaos. We need you to do what no civilized soldier would ever do. There are no rules here, no laws, no limits. You will never be hailed as heroes. You will never be honored, but you will be free. Show the Empire what happens when humanity stops pretending to be civilized. Make them regret ever finding us. Vriss placed the datapad down, the weight of it seeming far greater than its physical mass. He turned to the observation window, gazing at the silent, ordered procession of stars. For the first time in his storied career, a fissure appeared in the bedrock of his certainty. A shadow of doubt, cold and whispering, seeped through. The next morning, the Imperial Armada, 300 ships of sublime, terrible beauty, departed for the Sol system. Behind them, moving to intercept, came Earth's swarm. A chaotic, buzzing mass of armed scrap, crewed by the very id of a species unleashed. Men and women who had known only walls now had the infinite void, and they raced into it with the glee of children finally turned loose in a forbidden playground. On the bridge of the Pride, Vriss watched the long-range sensors. His fleet moved in Formation 7, a flawless, majestic crescent designed to envelop and annihilate, a ballet of death perfected over eons. The human swarm had no formation. It moved like a stellar infection, a Brownian motion of malice, utterly unpredictable. "We cannot plot their trajectories, Commander," his tactical officer stated, unease coloring his professional tone. "They are random. Then we will impose order upon their chaos," Vriss declared, the command sounding hollow even to his own ears. "All vessels, prepare for engagement." As the distance closed to weapons range, the comms officer spoke up. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the human vanguard." On speaker. The voice that filled the bridge was not one of defiance, but of pure, unadulterated joy. It was laughing. It spoke only 7 words, a mantra for the damned. No rules, no mercy, no prisoners. Then space itself erupted in fire, not with the coordinated volleys of a fleet, but with the spasmodic, frenzied outburst of a hive stirred to rage. And as Vriss watched the first human ships, already damaged, already dying, turn not away, but into his perfect formation, aiming their crippled hulls like giant, guided missiles, he understood. This was not a battle. It was a conversation in a new and terrible language. And he was only just beginning to learn its grammar. The war for humanity's soul was over. The war for its survival had just begun, and it was being waged not by soldiers, but by monsters who had found in the vast darkness their purpose. The Battle of Proxima Garrison did not unfold. It erupted, a 7-hour symphony of dissonance that shattered 4,000 years of martial doctrine. Commander Vriss stood in the heart of his command cathedral, a maestro whose orchestra was suddenly playing a song of screaming, breaking metal. His perfect crescent formation, designed to embrace and smother, found nothing to hold. The human ships were ghosts of momentum, scattering like shrapnel from a grenade. "Target the lead vessels. Neutralize their momentum," Vriss barked, the order tasting of ash. Kalrath plasma cannons, whose beams could bisect small moons, lanced out with divine precision. Human ships, patched together amalgamations of hull plating and hope, vaporized in silent, blossoming flowers of light. 3, 10, 20. But for every one that died, a dozen more arrowed forward, each moving with a terrifying, individual madness. They did not dodge in coordinated maneuvers. They twitched, their trajectories a product of whim or deranged instinct, making them impossible to lead, impossible to predict. "Commander, multiple vessels on confirmed collision courses. They are initiating suicide runs." Vriss watched, a cold stone of disbelief settling in his chest, as a human frigate, its port side sheared away and venting atmosphere in a glittering frost cloud, rammed the destroyer Relentless Pride. The impact was not a tactical strike. It was an act of visceral, personal hatred. Metal screamed. The Pride shuddered, alarms blaring a chorus of structural anguish. A single ship, Vriss muttered, clinging to logic. Acceptable attrition. Then 6 more dying human vessels, like wounded wolves turning on the hunt, pivoted with their last spurts of thrust. Point defense networks became gardens of blooming fire, shredding 4. 2 slipped through the storm. 1 buried itself in the cruiser, eternal vigilance. The other kissed the carrier dawn of victory near its fighter bay. For a moment, nothing. Then, the Dawn's forward section simply ceased to be, vomiting out a slow-motion volcano of debris and frozen, spinning bodies. 3,000 souls erased. They were using their corpses as weapons, turning their own dead ships into guided bombs. Disengage! The word tore from Vriss's throat, raw and unfamiliar. Reform at 10,000 kilometers. Create standoff distance. His fleet obeyed, retreating with a disciplined elegance that now seemed grotesquely slow. The human swarm pursued, many lagging, too damaged to follow. A moment of respite, a chance to breathe. Vriss allowed himself a sliver of grim satisfaction. He had weathered the first irrational surge. Commander! The sensor officer's voice was a thin wire of confusion. The vessels we left behind, the derelicts, they are powering up. On the tactical hologram, icons that had gone dark and cold flickered back to malevolent life. 47 ships, playing dead amidst the graveyard they had helped create, now ignited their engines. Not in retreat, but in a final, furious acceleration toward his regrouping fleet. "What are they broadcasting?" Vriss asked, already knowing he did not want the answer. The comms officer played it. A human voice, ragged with static and euphoria, shrieked over a cacophony of distorted sound they called music. "Surprise! We're not dead yet!" The ambush of the undead was devastating. 16 ships got through. The carrier Eternal Dawn, struck in its reactor, became a miniature sun. Its death throes crippled 2 nearby cruisers. In a single engagement, Vriss had lost 1/10 of his fleet not to a superior foe, but to a series of gruesome, theatrical tricks. While space burned, the ground war commenced at Proxima Centauri's colony, a settlement of 50,000, a footnote on the galactic ledger. Vriss, his focus fractured, granted the landing order to his 10,000 elite ground troops. The orbital bombardment had scoured the surface, leaving a smoldering plain of rubble, a textbook pacification. The troop carriers descended, majestic and serene. Their ramps lowered, and Calrath legionnaires disembarked in flawless ranks, their polished armor reflecting the fires of the world they had just scorched. They advanced, a wall of disciplined certainty. The humans erupted from the earth itself, from tunnels no bombardment could reach, from collapsed buildings that were now sniper nests, from the very ground at their feet. Fire erupted. Not energy bolts, but primitive, chattering bullets and crude explosives. The sheer volume was a physical wall. Calrath armor held, until it didn't. The humans focused fire with a predator's patience, targeting joints, visors, power couplings. "Commander, ground forces are taking heavy casualties. They report the enemy is utilizing an extensive subterranean network." Vriss watched helmet cam feeds that streamed directly into hell. He saw a human fighter, his torso a ruin of plasma burns, use his final breath to pull the pin on a grenade clasped against a Calrath soldier's chest. He saw another, disarmed and broken, lunge forward to sink his teeth into a soldier's neck seal. He saw no fear in their eyes, only a fierce, ecstatic focus. "They do not fear death," his tactical officer whispered, voicing the unspeakable. Why do they not fear death? After 3 hours, the colony was silent, a tomb of rubble and collapsed tunnels. The Calrath had taken the ground. Of the 10,000 who landed, 6,000 returned. They had won a massacre, and looked like the massacred. A single human survivor was found. A youth missing a hand, bleeding out from 2 torso wounds. He should have been comatose. Instead, he was brought aboard the Pride's medical bay laughing. A wet, bubbling sound of pure delight. On his private screen, Vriss observed the interrogation. The Calrath interrogator, his tone laced with revulsion and confusion, leaned in. Why do you fight like animals? Where is your honor, your discipline? The human's laughter died. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes brilliant with fever and insight. Honor? Discipline? He coughed, a spray of blood speckling his chin. We're not soldiers. We're the ones you lock in the dark. Earth opened the cages and pointed. We have nothing to go back to. This, he gestured weakly around the sterile bay. This is freedom. To fight, to kill, to die. And we are having fun. You will lose, the interrogator stated flatly. Our technology, our numbers. Maybe, the human interrupted, a terrible smile stretching his pale lips. But we will make you regret ever looking our way. We will make every victory taste like ashes. You killed 5,000 of us here, lost 4,000 of your best. We were just a colony. Wait until you meet the main fleet. Wait for Tier 2. His smile faded, replaced by something like pity. And if you're really unlucky, you'll meet Tier 3. Against all protocol, against the stunned silence of his officers, Vriss made a decision. Treat his wounds, give him a prosthetic, put him on a shuttle back to the nearest human outpost. Sir, I want Earth to see the cost, Vriss said, but the reason felt hollow even to him. Before the shuttle departed, the human requested a direct channel. His face, pale but alert, filled Vriss's screen. Thank you for the medical care. Very honorable. A message will be sent, Vriss said. Oh, it will, the human agreed. But not the one you think. You just showed us your mercy has limits. And you showed yourselves that we can make you bleed. Nearly 1 for 1. Now imagine that ratio against our real army. He leaned closer, the camera distorting his face. Pray you never find out what Tier 3 is. The reports from across the fledgling front flooded in. 6 systems. 6 victories. Each one a carbon copy of Proxima. Staggering Calrath casualties. Psychotic human tactics. Pyrrhic triumphs that left Imperial forces shell-shocked and depleted. In 3 months, the Empire had won every battle and was demonstrably losing the war. Summoned to the glittering, intimidating Grand Chamber on Calrath Prime, Commander Vriss stood before the Emperor's War Council. The walls shimmered with holographic tapestries of ancient victories. He felt the weight of those millennia judging him. Explain, the Emperor commanded, his calm more terrifying than any shout. Explain how we have seeded 12 systems in 3 months. Vriss stood rigid. We win every engagement, Your Majesty. But the humans do not fight to hold territory. They fight to destroy. They are a toxin. They attack, inflict maximum damage, and vanish. When we concentrate force, they dissolve. When we fortify, they strike elsewhere. They have turned warfare into a form of terrorism. Admiral Thrauz, a legend of the old wars, slammed his fist. Then drown them in steel, overwhelming force. We tried, Vriss said quietly, pulling up the data from the Helion cluster. 30 of our ships versus 3 of theirs. They ignored our fleet, destroyed a critical supply depot, and escaped. We lost more to logistical collapse than to their weapons. He played the recordings. The Council watched in horrified silence as human fighters, like metal spiders, attached to the fortress station Kalar 7 and cut their way inside. They watched a space battle where human ships broke apart a Kalrath battle group, not with strength, but with the tactical equivalent of a schoolyard taunt, scattering, reforming, ganging up on isolated vessels with feral glee. They heard the human calm chatter, laughter, singing, screams of joy. They are insane, a counselor whispered. Yes, Vriss agreed, the word final. And that is the weapon we cannot counter. It was then he introduced his gambit. Your Majesty, honored counselors, if we are to understand our enemy, we must hear from the enemy itself. He gestured, and the doors opened. Marcus Drake walked in. Not in shackles, but in a clean, simple Earth uniform. He moved with the relaxed grace of a man attending a dinner party, his eyes cataloging the opulent chamber with open curiosity. The air grew thick with aristocratic outrage. You volunteered? The Emperor asked, his gaze piercing. Drake shrugged. Curious. Wanted to see the palace. Nice digs. Admiral Thraus scowled. We could execute you where you stand. You could, Drake nodded cheerfully, but then you'd miss the point. He walked to the tactical display, a condemned man giving a seminar. He pointed at the 12 red systems. You think you're losing to tactics? You're not. Your tech is better. Your soldiers are better. You should win. He turned, his demeanor shifting to that of a physician delivering a fatal diagnosis. You care about winning. We care about hurting you. There's a difference. He tapped a system. You took this back last month. A victory. It will take you 5 years and a fortune to rebuild what we wrecked. How many such victories can your economy stomach? How many of your perfect, cradle-to-grave soldiers can you replace? Drake's voice dropped, becoming conversational, deadly. We've been fighting you with Tier 1. The professionals, the violent ones, the sane monsters. Tier 2 deploys next week. The chamber was ice. Vriss felt the dread, palpable now, seeping into the marble. What, the Emperor asked, each word a chip of flint, is Tier 2? Drake met his gaze without flinching. The people Earth was too scared to use. The ones no society could contain. Serial killers, war criminals who make history books flinch. The truly broken. And if that's not enough, there's Tier 3. He paused, and for the first time, Vriss saw a flicker of something genuine in the man's eyes. Fear. I've seen the files. They scare me. All the research that was banned, buried, locked in black vaults, because it was too evil to consider. Bioweapons, neurowarfare, things that don't just kill armies. They unravel species. We're trading you our prisoners for your children. Our trash for your treasures. How long can you afford that trade? I wonder. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum sucking the certainty from the room. Vriss saw it on the counselors' faces, the dawning, terrible comprehension. This was not a war of conquest. It was a war of mutual, assured, psychological annihilation. And humanity, with nothing to lose and a galaxy of darkness to gain, was willing to plunge deeper into the abyss than the Empire could ever follow. The Emperor leaned back, his face an unreadable mask. I will consider your words. His eyes moved to Vriss. Commander, your recommendation." Vries took a breath that felt like his last. The path of honor led over a cliff. The path of survival led through the humiliating, uncharted valley of peace. He thought of the laughing human on the shuttle, of Drake's chilling calculus, of the thousands of tallies being painted on hulls in the dark. "Your Majesty," he said, the words echoing in the sacred, victory-haunted chamber. "I recommend we negotiate." The silence in the grand chamber was not mere absence of sound. It was a physical entity, heavy and cold, pressing down on the assembled lords of a 4,000-year empire. Admiral Thraus's face, moments ago purple with rage, had drained to a bloodless gray. The word hung in the air like a blasphemy. Negotiate. It was Marcus Drake who broke the spell, his voice cutting through the tension with unnerving nonchalance. "Smartest thing I've heard in this fancy room." He gave a slow, deliberate nod to Vries, a gesture not of respect, but of recognition. "You see it too." The Emperor did not rage, he did not dismiss. He simply stared at Vries, his ancient eyes weighing the commander's soul against the countless generations depicted in the victory tapestries. "You would have us treat with this?" He did not gesture at Drake, but at the concept he represented. Chaos, weaponized. "Your Majesty," Vries said, forcing steel into his voice, "we are not treating with their civilization. We are bartering with their id. And their id has shown us its teeth. I have seen Tier 2's psychological profiles. I have reviewed the circumstantial evidence for Tier 3. This is no longer a question of military victory. It is a question of existential cost. Do we preserve our pride at the price of our cultural sanity?" The emergency session of the Imperial Senate was a 3-day funeral for galactic certainty. Vries presented not just casualty reports, but a psychological autopsy of the conflict. He showed them the recordings from Proxima, from Calar 7. He played the laughter over the comms. He laid bare the cold arithmetic Drake had spelled out. The Empire traded priceless, lifelong warriors for Earth's discarded predators. He saved the most classified, horrifying intelligence for last. The shadowy outlines of Earth's banned research. Pathogen matrices keyed to Calrath DNA. Resonant frequency weapons designed to induce permanent psychosis. Neural nanite swarms. The evidence for Tier 3 was circumstantial, but the blueprint was terrifyingly plausible. "They have built a doomsday weapon," Vries concluded, his voice echoing in the hushed, cavernous Senate Hall, "and populated it with their damned. They are not asking us to defeat an army. They are asking us to willingly walk into a slaughterhouse of the mind and spirit, and pay for the privilege with the blood of our finest. We can win every battle, and still lose what makes us Calrath." The vote was a seismic shock to the imperial psyche. But faced with the specter of a war that targeted not just bodies, but the very fabric of their society, pragmatism won over pride. The Empire would talk. The neutral station Osiris hung in the silent gulf between fronts, a elegant, fragile bubble of Zelfian diplomacy. As Commander Vries's shuttle approached, his first sight of the human delegation's escort turned the negotiated peace from a bitter necessity into a visceral warning. The Tier 2 squadron held position around the station. Their ships were not painted for war, but for nightmare. A matte, light-absorbing black that seemed to suck the very stars into their hulls. And on that void, painted in stark, bloodless white, were sigils, stylized skulls, weeping eyes, tallies that ran into the thousands. One ship bore a simple, elegant phrase along its flank: "Hell's Rejects." They did not patrol. They loitered, moving in slow, unpredictable arcs, like great basking sharks of the void. They want us to see, Vriz's tactical officer murmured, her voice tight. This is not stealth. This is theater. The station's Zelthian commander, Vorath, met Vriz at the airlock, his scales flickering with subdued agitation. Commander, the human diplomat, Sarah Chen, is in Conference Room 1. She has brought 5 of the Tier 2 personnel as security detail. He hesitated. They have broken no protocols, but their presence is disruptive. One of them stood on the observation deck for 2 hours, humming a single repeating tune. It was unsettling. The conference room was a study in dissonance. Sarah Chen and her 2 aides were models of bureaucratic normalcy. Simple suits, data pads, expressions of polite focus. Standing behind them, arrayed like a gallery of living warnings, were the 5 Tier 2 operatives. They wore no uniform. One sported a tattered military jacket over civilian fatigues. A woman with a latticework of scars on her arms wore pieces of tactical armor, buckled haphazardly over a flight suit. Their eyes did not scan the room for threats. They settled on Vriz and his guards with the dispassionate interest of entomologists observing insects. The negotiations were a stark, sterile dance around the gaping chasm of what had occurred. Chen was polite, firm, unyielding. Vriz stated the Empire's demands for reparations, for formal submission. You invaded, Chen stated calmly. We defended. The only reparations owed flow in the opposite direction. Our terms are simple. Complete withdrawal from all systems contested since first contact. Mutual recognition of sovereignty. No tribute. No subjugation. The Empire does not retreat, Vriz replied, the old mantra feeling hollow. Then the Empire will continue to bleed, Chen said, her tone never changing. We are not expending heroes. We are expending liabilities. Our amortization rate is favorable. One of the Tier 2 operatives behind her, a tall man with a single scar from ear to chin, let out a soft, breathy chuckle. Chen didn't turn, but the man fell silent, a faint, frozen smile remaining on his lips. During a recess, Vriz was in his quarters when the request came. The scarred man, identified as Marcus Fenrir, wanted a private meeting. Vriz read the file. Former Special Forces, discharged after a hand-to-hand massacre, subsequent imprisonment for brutal crimes, a psyche evaluation that read like a diagnostic manual for predatory species. Fenrir was already in the small meeting room, feet propped on the table. Commander, thanks for coming. Man to man, yeah? What do you want, Fenrir? To give you some free advice. Fenrir dropped his feet and leaned forward, all casual pretense gone. Take the deal. Go home. Throw a parade. Call it a strategic realignment, whatever lets you sleep. But end this. You, of all people, advocate for peace? I advocate for not seeing what comes next, Fenrir said, his dark eyes holding Vriz's. Tier 1 was fun. Tier 2, we're the monsters you read about. But Tier 3? He shook his head, a genuine flicker of unease crossing his features. Tier 3 isn't soldiers. It's everything your civilization has nightmares about. Plagues that know your name. Thoughts that aren't your own. Machines in your blood. It's the box of evils your kind sealed shut millennia ago. We never sealed ours. We just labeled it for emergency use. You are that emergency. Is this a threat? Vriz asked, his blood cold. It's a fact, Fenrir stated flatly. You forced Chen to walk out of here, and the leash comes off Tier 2. And if we can't do the job, they open the last box. And then it's not about winning a war. It's about surviving a curse. He stood to leave. Oh, and these 5 of us here? We're the presentable ones. The ones who can almost pass for human in a bright room. The real artists are still on those ships out there. You don't want to meet them. The private audience with the Emperor, after Vriss relayed Fenrir's warning and the corroborating weapons research, was brief. The Emperor stood at his great window, watching the streams of traffic over the capital. 4,000 years, he mused, his back to Vriss. We endured, because we knew when to conquer and when to consolidate. Pride is the luxury of the secure. Survival is the duty of the wise. He turned, his decision etched in the new lines on his face. Send the acceptance, but prepare the full reserve fleet. This ends, one way or another, at Osiris. The signing ceremony was an exercise in collective fiction. Under the witness of neutral species, Commander Vriss and Ambassador Sarah Chen signed the Treaty of Osiris. The terms were exactly as Chen had stated. Withdrawal, recognition, peace. No victory clauses. No admission of defeat. Just a cessation of hostilities, written in the blood of billions already spent. As the delegates mingled in hollow courtesy afterward, Vriss found himself on the observation deck. Marcus Fenrir was there, staring into the same star-flecked void. No celebration? Vriss asked. Nothing to celebrate, Fenrir said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. The game's over. I go back to a cell, or a frozen rock at the edge of nowhere. You go back to an empire that's just learned it can be scared. He glanced at Vriss. Was it real? Tier 3? The research was real, Vriss said. But would they have used it? Vriss considered the smiling, broken youth from Proxima, the laughing pilots, the cold calculus in Chen's eyes. I believe they would have. Because when you have already embraced the monster to save yourself, using a worse monster is just the next logical step. Fenrir nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I'm glad we didn't have to find out. The aftermath was a quiet, pervasive trauma. On Calrath Prime, there were riots, recriminations, a silent, shamed confusion. The Emperor absorbed the blame, a shield for his people's shattered myth of invincibility. Vriss retired, not in disgrace, but in a silence that spoke volumes. He wrote a treatise on combating the asymmetric adversary, a cold, clinical dissection of the war that became mandatory reading for a new generation of officers who would never know the comfort of pure superiority. On Earth, the victory was a festering secret beneath the public parades. The Frontier Force heroes were given a bitter choice: return to prison, exile to new, harsh frontier worlds, or enlistment in the permanent, deniable Frontier Security Force. Most chose exile or the Force. They were humanity's dark mirror, now permanently separate from the society that had spawned and used them. Sarah Chen became an ambassador. Her first posting, the Calrath Empire itself. The diplomacy was exquisitely polite, achingly strained, built on the mutual understanding that they had stared into the same abyss, and both had flinched. The truth about Tier 3's potential did eventually leak. The scandal was global, then galactic. There were investigations, resignations, prosecutions. But the prevailing, unspoken sentiment was a grim understanding. Faced with oblivion, humanity had reached into its darkest closets and prepared to unleash every forbidden toy. It was not moral. It was survival. 15 years of tense peace later, a new, mindless threat emerged. The Korvax swarm, a devouring insectoid hive. Neither empire alone could stop it. In a moment of desperate inspiration, a joint task force was proposed. Calrath Technology and Disciplined Command, Human Frontier Security Force, consultants, and their chaotic, vicious tactical doctrine. Vries, consulting from the bridge of the Calrath flagship, Resolute, watched the tactical feed. Next to him stood Marcus Fenrir, now officially a tactical advisor, his eyes alight with a familiar, terrifying glee. "Funny, isn't it?" Fenrir said as they watched human-piloted gunships, using Calrath-provided advanced shields, perform insane, corkscrewing attacks on swarm carriers. "Spent a year trying to turn each other into stardust. Now we're doing this." "A common enemy can forge strange alliances," Vries said. "Don't get sentimental, Commander." Fenrir grinned, the old predator fully present. "I just missed the fight, and now I get to fight with the best toys in the galaxy." He leaned forward, pointing at a developing swarm maneuver. "See that? They're bunching up. Classic herd mentality. Let's give them a surprise." He keyed his mic not to the Calrath command channel, but to an open frequency used by the human elements. His voice was a joyful snarl. "Wildfire Squadron, you see that juicy cluster at bearing 030? They think they're safe in numbers. Let's teach them math. Converge and apply Chaos Protocol Theta. Make it hurt." What followed was not a military maneuver. It was a feeding frenzy. Human ships, operating with a coordination that was entirely emergent and intuitive, fell upon the swarm formation. They didn't break it, they infested it, turning the swarm's own numbers against itself in a whirlwind of close-range slaughter. The Calrath fleet provided the anvil, a wall of precise, overwhelming fire. The human forces were the unpredictable, mercurial hammer. The Battle of Korvax Prime broke the swarm's back. In the war room afterward, amid the quiet relief, Vries saw a Calrath junior officer approach one of Fenrir's scarred veterans. The young officer, his uniform pristine, hesitated, then offered a data chip. "Your squadron's final evasion matrix during the third engagement. It defied all our predictive models. Would you share the algorithm?" The veteran took the chip, a slow smile spreading. "Algorithm, kid? There's no algorithm. We just went where they weren't looking." He tossed the chip back. "Try thinking less. It annoys the enemy." It was in that moment Vries understood the true, long-term consequence of the war. It wasn't peace. It was cross-pollination. The Empire was learning audacity. Humanity was being offered structure. The monsters, having saved civilization, were now, awkwardly, being integrated into its defense. Years later, Vries, an old man walking with a cane, visited the frontier world of New Haven. In a quiet park overlooking a rugged, beautiful valley, stood a simple, dark stone monument. It listed names, human and Calrath, from the war. At the bottom was an inscription. Unofficial, unclaimed, but deeply true. They wanted a war, but not this one. We gave them chaos, and chaos won. May we never need to do it again. As he read it, he sensed a presence. Marcus Fenrir, his hair shot with gray but his posture still that of a coiled spring, stood a few feet away, looking at the same stone. "You come here often?" Vries asked. "Every year, anniversary of the signing. Someone should remember." "Remember what?" Fenrir was silent for a long time, the wind ruffling his hair. "Not the victory," he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "The choice. The day the civilized galaxy looked into the heart of the savage, and the savage looked back, and they both agreed to look away. He turned to Vriss, the old, sharp smile returning, but tempered now with something like wisdom. "We showed you your monster, Commander, and you showed us we didn't have to be only that. Strange trade." Vriss nodded, looking from the monument to the thriving, if rough, colony around them, to the stars where joint patrols now flew. The galaxy was vaster, darker, and more complicated than the Empire's old stories had ever allowed. The war had been a lesson written in fire and blood, that civilization is a thin veneer, that rules are a contract, not all sign, and that sometimes, to preserve the light, you must be willing to understand, and even harness the dark. The monsters were home now, not in cages, but on the frontier. And the frontier, it turned out, was everywhere.